Rose Revolution of 2003 finally allowed Georgia to close the book on the Soviet era, the country's politics dominated by one man. President Mikhail Saakashvili has won 2 elections and survived a war with Russia since then. Strategically important on the post-Cold War chessboard, Georgia's goals to join the European Union and NATO have amplified friction with Moscow. Last week, domestic problems brought street demonstrations in Tbilisi as protesters complained of poverty and accused Saakashvili of monopolizing power. The West and human rights groups condemned the police use of force as excessive. Several days later, the atmosphere was very different when Mikhail Saakashvili spoke to Euronews. The man who likes to be called Misha chose a public park for the location near the presidential palace where he'd hosted a dinner.
Sorry for diverting for a dinner.
Mr. President, the event tonight has been called Atlantic Dinners. Your admiration for the West is well known. How Western is Georgia today?
Well, I think it's one of the oldest Christian nations. It always had wanted to be Western, but it had always been in geographic alienation from the West. So it's like the dream that never came true, but it was always there. It was always around. And the lucky occasion is that the country has survived as Georgia, and now maybe it's another chance to get back to our historic roots or to get back to our Europe. Let's see.
Now, you've talked about the progress you've made since the revolution, the Rose Revolution. Equally, we've seen evidence of problems that manifested itself with these protests over the last week, including some violence. How do you explain those events?
Look, we have groups that don't run for parliament, don't run for elected offices. They have full access for television, but they say they cannot count really on people supporting them. Then they say they want to overturn government through violent or some kinds of street means. But the good news is that they're not that numerous. You know, we decided to come here spontaneous, last minute. The people were not selected, and you see the neighborhood here. People are very friendly. That doesn't mean all of them vote for me. I would bet that some of them don't. But they are here, and you know, people in this country are peaceful. So it is safe, but it has people who sometimes want to express themselves in violent ways, and this is very unfortunate. I really regret it.
But equally, human rights groups criticized what they say was excessive violence by the police.
Look, the European Union ambassador clearly said here that government's action were legitimate, and even if some people might claim, as he said, that there was an excessive use of force, it's very hard to verify it. And certainly I would be the last one to want to use violence. There is a due process of law. We are upgrading our police force. I think they've acted much more professional than in the past. I still think they are not ideal. The problem is that when you are encountering radicalism and violence, this is bad. And then when you have, unfortunately, victims, when basically cars of the demonstrators overrun police officers, killing some of them and injuring some of the others very badly, then emotions run high, and we tame these emotions, but of course we need to upgrade ourselves even further.
You yourself have acknowledged that there are underlying social problems. For instance, you hinted tonight at a generation gap. You say that Georgia is very young, but there are a lot of people over a certain age who perhaps are excluded and are poor and are unemployed and are not benefiting from the way the country has been going.
Yes, there was this generational change here. We had to find new approaches. We had to implement very brave reforms. We fired 90% of bureaucracy after the Rose Revolution. We fired the entire police force in Georgia. Every time you want to get turnout against us in the streets, you'll find the people, how like recently in the recent rallies, half of them were former policemen fired a few years ago. Now, if we fired those people, we knew we would be running into problems. People get used to better situation. We have right now 5 times less crime rate than we used to have. We are second safest country in Europe. We are one of 3 least corrupt countries in Europe. But that came at a price tag. The price tag is that we alienated certain people in the local society, and these people will always strike us back. But we have to handle it through some kind of political dialogue, but explain to everybody there is no turning back.
You mentioned political dialogue. I mean, a major problem for Georgia as a country is relations with Russia, given all that has happened. You seem to make light of those problems tonight, certainly on a personal level. But do they not worry you?
I'm very worried about Russia, and I'm very worried about Russia that will not reform and tries to get stronger in terms of military buildup and aggressiveness toward the neighbors. And I'm also worried about weaker Russia, because they have inherent problems. They have strong institutional problems and corruption. And the point here is we have to find middle way. We need Russia that is more open-minded, more liberal, more open towards modernity. And then with this kind of Russia, we can find common language. We are not suicidal. We don't want to confront Russia. We've already seen bad fruits of that. On the other hand, we want to stay free and we want to be on our own. We don't want to be back in whatever the old Russian imperial fault, which basically is a fiction, but it's still in the mind of some politicians out there, not least the Prime Minister Putin. So, it's a big challenge for small countries and vulnerable countries like Georgia.
Does your relentless push west antagonize Russia, and could you do more in terms of making overtures?
Look, our push towards the West is not based on geopolitical priorities. It's based on our own internal values. And I think open society, a tolerant, democratic, transparent one, is something that brings us closer to what is, I think, more or less mainstream European model. We don't want bad relations with our neighbors. The last thing you want to, when you want to become an open society as a hub for the region, last thing you want to alienate your biggest neighbor. Now, how to normalize those relations, I think it goes still through modernization of Russia, through some kind of open-minded approach on their part, ultimately they should leave our territory with all their troops and bases here, and allow us to be ourselves, and then they will find good friends in Georgia.
You mentioned Prime Minister Putin. As far as your position is concerned, it's been suggested that after you're president that you might like to be Prime Minister here.
I think Georgia has a totally different system. I think we are now focused on a very important reform for the next 2.5 years. My remaining mandate will go on for another 2.5 years. It's almost an eternity for us. When we have all these challenges, the last thing I want to get here, from my perspective, is being a lame duck. Certainly debate about my future position is not my priority because I want to avoid a lame duck. But one thing I can say for sure, Georgia will have democratic transition. Georgia will have much more open society. Georgia will never be run by just one person or small group of persons in the future. And this is the country that should be where there should be lots of political stakeholders and should be much more liberal and open-minded and much more egalitarian in terms of who is running it. And I'll make sure that it happens, whatever my position in the future is.
President Saakashvili, thanks very much for talking to Euronews. Thank you.